Good morning. Today, of course, we have to think about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. The triumphal entry, it's called, and it's one of the few events in the life of Jesus that is recorded in all four Gospels. Not many. The birth of Jesus is not recorded in all four. The baptism of Jesus is referred to in John's Gospel, but not recorded there, but John is referred to. The feeding of the 5,000 is in all four Gospels. But most of the teaching of Jesus is in the first three. I could go on, but this is in all four with slightly different additions. And you can read it in either John 12, 12 to 19, Matthew 21, 1 to 11, Mark 11, 1 to 11, and Luke 19, 29 to 44. I'm looking at the version in John's Gospel, which adds a little something to the circumstances. It starts at verse 12 of chapter 12. The next day a great crowd had come to the feast. Who had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem. So they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel." And Jesus found a young ass and sat upon it, as it is written, "Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold your king is coming, sitting on an ass's colt." His disciples did not understand this at first, but when Jesus was glorified, then they remembered that this had been written of him and had been done to him. The crowd that had been with him when he called Lazarus out of the tomb and raised him from the dead bore witness. The reason why the crowd went to meet him was that they had heard that he had done this sign. The Pharisees then said to one another, "You see that you can do nothing. Look, the world has gone after him." So John adds this thought. Oh, there's my bird song again. John adds the thought that it was partly because of the raising of Lazarus to life, that so many people gathered that day to greet Jesus as he came into Jerusalem. He couldn't hide his popularity. He was well known. I would think there would hardly be anybody in the whole of the land who didn't know someone who'd been healed by Jesus or whose life had been changed by him. Jesus had been ministering for 3.5 years and had met and been with people from most places, certainly in the north of the country, perhaps not so much in the south. But they were all gathering for the Passover. It's significant that the major events at the end of the life of Jesus coincide with the Passover, because the Passover was the great type, the great foreshadowing of what Jesus was going to do, that just as the lamb that was slain on the Passover night and eaten, the lamb without blemish was slain, and if they stayed in the house with the blood of the lamb on the doorposts, they would not suffer what the Egyptians suffered, which was the loss of the firstborn child. God gave his firstborn so that we could live as a substitute for us. The picture in the Passover is very clear for all to see. But it's interesting that John says that his disciples, until after all the events happened, and when Jesus revealed to them, I think in his resurrection appearances, how the Old Testament foretold everything that he had done and lived through, they didn't really associate the prophecy in Zechariah 9 verse 9 about the king coming riding on the colt of a donkey, of an ass. They didn't associate that with Jesus until afterwards. We know it because it's recorded in the Gospels. They saw the significance, they saw the link, and they put it in their writings. They could see that Jesus was once again fulfilling the prophecies. He fulfilled every prophecy about the coming of the Messiah. But there's a lot of prophecies he didn't fulfill, which are about his coming again. And they will be fulfilled just as literally just as perfectly as the prophecies were fulfilled during his lifetime. Fear not, daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming, sitting on an ass's colt, or on the colt of a donkey. One of the other gospel writers specifies that it was an animal that had never been ridden. Jesus came into Jerusalem as king, as the king of the Jews, but not as a king in the way they expected him to be a king. And it's interesting, he followed after David's example, didn't he? Because David was at times a very undignified king in some of the things that he did. He was not a king like, not until his latter years anyway, a king like the kings of the lands around them. He was God's kind of king. And Jesus is the ultimate King of kings and Lord of lords. He comes in triumph. He doesn't have to ride a magnificent white stallion. He doesn't have to come in any other guise. He will come again on a white horse, demonstrating his victory. But when he came into Jerusalem at this point, the victory hadn't been won yet. So he came on a donkey, the foal of an ass. And all these people greeted him, all these people who'd heard about what had happened to Lazarus. This is interesting because it says earlier on that Lazarus and Jesus were not able to go about because the knowledge that he'd raised Lazarus from the dead had caused his enemies to want to kill both him and Lazarus, to stop all these rumours and all these things from flying around. But all these people came together and they honoured Jesus as king. They honoured him as he came into Jerusalem. I don't know what they expected him to do, but he didn't do what they expected him to do. And the consequences were that by the end of the week, they turned against him. But we watch him in our mind's eye. We see the paintings that have been painted, the depictions in children's Bibles of Jesus on the donkey with the palm trees waving around and on the ground in front of him. A wonderful moment of glory for Jesus as he comes into Jerusalem. Have a great day today. God bless you. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.